The arrangement. Dr. Marcus Webb pressed his palm against the viewing window of the Nebula Lounge, watching Saturn's rings shimmer in the distance. At 42, he'd spent the last decade studying alien minerals on Titan VII, surrounded by colleagues but drowning in loneliness. His small quarters felt like a tomb most nights, filled with nothing but research data and memories he'd rather forget. "You look like you could use some company," his colleague Rodriguez had said last week, sliding a discreet card across the table. "Premium service, very professional, very discreet." Marcus had laughed it off initially, calling it pathetic. Yet here he sat, 3 days later, waiting for someone named Zara from the Valtorian Companion Service. The door chimed and he turned, nearly dropping his drink. She was stunning, her skin a deep purple that seemed to shift in the lounge's ambient lighting, like twilight made flesh. She wore a silver dress that complemented her unusual complexion perfectly, moving with a grace that suggested she was accustomed to being watched. But what caught Marcus off guard wasn't her exotic beauty or the way every head in the lounge turned to follow her passage. It was the gentle way she touched the shoulder of a young human couple as she passed, offering them a warm smile when they looked nervous and out of place. Something genuine flickered in her violet eyes, a kindness that seemed to exist independent of her profession. "Dr. Webb," she said, extending her hand as she reached his table. Her voice had a melodic quality, slightly accented in the way of those who'd learned Galactic Standard as a second language. "I'm Zara, but please, let's skip the formalities. Tell me something true about yourself." Marcus had prepared for this, rehearsing safe topics about his research and the colony's interesting features. Instead, he found himself laughing, really laughing, when he stumbled through an embarrassing story about his first week on Titan VII when he'd accidentally locked himself in a sample vault for 6 hours. Zara's laughter wasn't polite or practiced. It was rich and spontaneous, making her lean forward with genuine delight, her hand briefly touching his arm. "Did they ever let you forget it?" she asked, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Never," he admitted. "My supervisor still calls me Vault Boy when he's had too much to drink." They talked for 45 minutes straight, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. She asked questions that made him think about why he'd really chosen this isolated posting, gently challenging his assumption that dedicating himself entirely to work was noble rather than avoidance. She shared stories about her homeworld of Valtoria, painting pictures of purple seas and cities built into crystalline mountains. "Your people must be incredible engineers," Marcus said, genuinely fascinated. "We were," Zara replied, and something sad flickered across her features before she smiled again. "Now tell me about Earth." "I've never been." When she asked about his family, Marcus found himself talking about his wife, Elena, something he rarely did. How cancer had taken her 7 years ago, how he'd fled to the furthest colony he could find to escape the emptiness of their home. Zara listened with complete attention, her expression open and empathetic in a way that felt entirely real. Their hands brushed when they both reached for the water carafe, and Marcus felt electricity shoot through him. Not just physical attraction, though that was certainly present, but something deeper. A connection he hadn't felt since Elena. When the hour ended, Marcus experienced a sensation he couldn't quite name. Not disappointment in the service, but genuine regret that their time was over. He wanted to know more about the sadness he'd glimpsed behind her stories, wanted to hear her laugh again, wanted to understand why a woman this intelligent and engaging was working as a companion. Zara gathered her belongings slowly, as if reluctant to leave. Their eyes met across the table, and Marcus saw his own confusion reflected in her violet gaze. "Thank you for being real," she said quietly as she stood. "Most clients don't even try." "Thank you for making it easy," he replied, rising with her. At the door, she hesitated, and for a moment Marcus thought she might say something else. Instead, she simply smiled, squeezed his hand once, and disappeared into the corridor traffic. Marcus returned to his seat, staring at the empty chair across from him. He'd just spent a significant portion of his salary on an hour of companionship, and somehow it felt both completely worth it and utterly insufficient. His rational mind was already calculating when he could arrange another meeting, even as a quieter voice warned him this was dangerous territory. He pulled out his comm device and opened her booking profile, his finger hovering over the appointment request. 1 hour had shown him something he'd forgotten existed, a glimpse of genuine human connection in the vast loneliness of space. The problem was, 1 hour would never be enough. Boundaries blur. 5 days passed before Marcus saw Zara again, though not for lack of trying. He'd walked past the Celestial Gardens 3 times, the recreational area she'd mentioned enjoying during their conversation. On the 4th attempt, his persistence paid off. She was sitting on a bench near the bioluminescent orchids, reading something on a data pad. The purple glow of the flowers seemed to dance across her skin, making her appear almost ethereal. Marcus's heart hammered as he approached, carrying a small package wrapped in Earth-style paper. "Dr. Webb," she said, looking up with surprise that quickly shifted into something warmer, "this is quite the coincidence." "Marcus, please," he said, sitting beside her without invitation, "and I'll be honest, it's not a coincidence. I remembered you mentioned this place." Zara's expression flickered between professional caution and genuine pleasure. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, but made no move to leave. "This isn't how the arrangement works." "I brought you something," Marcus offered the package, watching her hesitate before accepting it. Inside was a small crystal from Earth, nothing expensive but genuine quartz from the Colorado mountains. "You said you'd never been to Earth. I thought you might like a piece of it." She held the crystal up to the light, watching it refract the purple glow of the gardens. "It's beautiful," she whispered, and when she looked at him, her eyes were suspiciously bright. "But Marcus, you can't just give me gifts. You can't just show up. There are rules, boundaries I need to maintain." "Then tell me to leave," he said quietly, "tell me you don't want to see me, and I'll respect that." The silence stretched between them, filled with the soft hum of the garden's environmental systems and the distant chatter of other visitors. Finally, Zara sighed, tucking the crystal carefully into her bag. "I have 20 minutes before my next appointment," she said, "walk with me." They moved through the gardens slowly, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they navigated the narrow paths. Marcus told her about his latest research, how they'd discovered mineral compounds that might revolutionize energy storage. She listened with the same focused attention as before, asking intelligent questions that revealed she understood far more about biochemistry than he'd expected. "You're not just a pretty face, are you?" he said, then immediately winced. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong." Zara laughed, that same genuine sound that had captivated him during their first meeting. "I was in my 3rd year of medical school when everything fell apart on Valtoria," she said, her voice taking on a distant quality. "The economic collapse happened so fast. One day I had a future, the next I was just another refugee looking for any work that would let me send money home to my family." "Medical school," Marcus breathed. "Zara, why didn't you continue?" "There are programs, scholarships for displaced students. Do you know how many Valtorian refugees applied for those programs?" she asked, but there was no bitterness in her voice, only resignation. "Thousands. And the ones who got selected had better credentials, better connections. I had neither, so I found work I could do. The companion service pays well, allows me to save. Maybe someday I can afford to finish." They'd reached a secluded alcove where a small waterfall cascaded over synthetic rocks, creating a curtain of privacy. Marcus turned to face her fully, unable to resist reaching up to tuck a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. "You deserve better than this," he said. "Better than what?" she asked, and there was a challenge in her voice. "Better than honest work that hurts no one. Better than choosing my own clients and setting my own boundaries. I'm not ashamed of what I do, Marcus. But I am afraid of what I'm starting to feel when I'm with you." Her honesty struck him like a physical blow. "What are you feeling?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Zara closed the distance between them. Her lips met his softly at first, tentative and questioning. Marcus responded by wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. She tasted like the sweet Valtorian fruit she'd been eating, and her skin was warm beneath his hands despite its unusual color. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Zara rested her forehead against his chest. "This is so dangerous," she murmured. "If the agency finds out I'm seeing a client outside arrangements, they could terminate my contract. And deportation, Marcus, do you understand? I'd be sent back to Valtoria where there's nothing waiting for me." "Then we'll be careful," he said, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. "We'll figure it out together." "You don't understand what you're asking," she said, but her hands were already moving up his chest, fingers curling into his shirt. "I have other clients. I can't just stop working. This isn't some romantic story where love conquers all and everyone lives happily ever after." "I'm not asking you to stop working," Marcus said, though the thought of her with other clients made his stomach clench. "I'm just asking for a chance. For whatever this is between us to have room to breathe." Zara pulled back slightly, studying his face with those remarkable violet eyes. "You're serious about this," she said, and it wasn't quite a question. "Terrifyingly so," he admitted. She was quiet for a long moment, then checked her chronometer and cursed softly in Valtorian. "I'm late," she said, but she kissed him again, quick and fierce. "Meet me tomorrow night. Sector 7, the observation deck. 2200 hours. And Marcus, don't book an appointment. Just come." She disappeared into the garden traffic, leaving Marcus standing alone by the waterfall with the taste of her still on his lips and the knowledge that he'd just crossed a line from which there was no return. Hidden depths. The observation deck was nearly empty when Marcus arrived, just a few maintenance workers finishing their shift rotation. He found Zara silhouetted against the massive viewport, Saturn's amber glow painting her purple skin in shades of bronze and gold. She'd traded her usual elegant attire for something simpler, dark pants and a flowing top that suggested this meeting was personal rather than professional. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said without turning around. "I haven't been sure of anything since I met you," Marcus admitted, joining her at the window, "but I knew I'd be here." She smiled at that, finally looking at him. In the dim lighting, her features seemed softer, more vulnerable. "I finished my last appointment 2 hours ago," she said quietly. "I told the agency I was taking tomorrow off. First time in 8 months. Marcus wanted to ask if that decision was because of him, but the answer was already in her eyes. Instead, he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers as they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the cosmic dance of Saturn's moons. "Tell me about Elena," Zara said eventually, "your wife. You mentioned her once but then changed the subject." The request caught Marcus off guard. Most people avoided the topic, uncomfortable with grief they couldn't fix. "What do you want to know?" he asked carefully. "Everything," Zara said, turning to face him fully. "If we're doing this, whatever this is, I want to know all of you. Not just the parts you think are safe to share." So Marcus told her about meeting Elena in graduate school, how she'd been studying art history while he pursued xenobiology. How they'd spent their honeymoon on Mars, laughing at his terrible attempts to paint the rust-colored landscapes she loved. About the diagnosis that came 3 years into their marriage, the brutal 18 months of treatments that ultimately failed, and the crushing emptiness that followed. "I ran," Marcus confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "Everyone told me to take time, to process, to heal. Instead, I applied for the most remote posting I could find and buried myself in work. I thought if I stayed busy enough, if I put enough distance between myself and Earth, it would stop hurting." "Did it work?" Zara asked gently. "No," he admitted, "it just made me numb. Until I met you." Zara was quiet for a moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. "I understand running," she said finally. "When Valtoria's economy collapsed, it wasn't just about money. Our whole society fractured. Families turned on each other, friends became strangers, everyone desperately trying to survive. I had a fiancé, Torin. We were supposed to get married after I finished medical school." "What happened to him?" Marcus asked. He stayed, Zara said simply. When I got the chance to leave, to find work off-world, he begged me not to go. Said we should stay together, face whatever came as a unit. But I could see the writing on the wall. Staying meant watching everything we dreamed of crumble into nothing. So I left, and he never forgave me for choosing survival over love. Do you regret it? Marcus asked. Zara considered the question carefully. I regret hurting him, she said, but I don't regret leaving. Maybe that makes me selfish, but I wanted to live, Marcus. I wanted a future, even if it meant starting over completely. Even if it meant doing work that people like Torin would have been ashamed of. There's nothing shameful about what you do, Marcus said firmly. Isn't there? Zara challenged, but her tone was more curious than defensive. Society says there is. The agency markets us as companions, because calling us what we actually are makes clients uncomfortable. And don't misunderstand, I chose this work freely, I set boundaries, I'm treated well. But I'm not naive about what people think when they see someone like me. Marcus pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. I think, he said carefully, that you're one of the most intelligent, resilient, and genuinely kind people I've ever met. I think you've survived things that would have destroyed others, and you did it with grace. And I think anyone who judges you for doing what you had to do can go to hell. Zara laughed, surprising them both. You're very sweet when you're being protective, she said, then sobered, but you need to understand something, Marcus. I'm not going to stop working, not yet. I have responsibilities, family depending on the money I send home, and savings I'm building toward finishing my degree someday. If we do this, if we try to have something real, you're going to have to accept that I'll still have other clients. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, even though he'd known they were coming. I won't lie and say that doesn't bother me, he said slowly, the thought of you with someone else makes me want to put my fist through this viewport. But I also understand reality. I'm not going to give you ultimatums or ask you to choose between your livelihood and me. Even though it's killing you, Zara observed. Even though it's killing me, Marcus confirmed, because the alternative is not having you in my life at all, and that's worse. Zara reached up, cupping his face in her hands. You're either incredibly mature or incredibly stupid, she said, but there was warmth in her voice. Probably both, Marcus admitted, then kissed her deeply. This kiss was different from their first in the gardens, less tentative and more urgent. Zara's hands moved to his hair, pulling him closer as his arms tightened around her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Come home with me, Zara whispered, I have a small apartment in the residential sector. Nothing fancy, but it's private. Marcus nodded, unable to form words. They left the observation deck hand in hand, navigating the corridors of Titan 7 to the modest residential blocks where service workers lived. Zara's apartment was indeed small, barely larger than Marcus's own quarters, but she'd made it warm with textiles from Valtoria and soft lighting that made her purple skin seem to glow. I've never brought anyone here before, she confessed, suddenly seeming nervous. Clients always book hotel rooms or use the agency facilities. This is mine, my private space. Then I'm honored, Marcus said sincerely. What followed was tender and passionate, two lonely people finding solace in each other. They moved together with a synchronicity that surprised them both, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with gentle exploration and growing confidence. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Zara's narrow bed, her head resting on his chest as his fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. Stay, she whispered into the darkness, please stay tonight. Always, Marcus promised, and meant it. The crisis. Marcus woke to urgent pounding on Zara's door. She stirred beside him, confusion giving way to alarm as she checked the chronometer showing 0500 hours. Stay here, she whispered, pulling on a robe. Through the thin walls, Marcus heard angry voices. Her agency supervisor, demanding to know why she'd missed 2 scheduled appointments. Someone had reported seeing her with a client outside of arranged meetings. The conversation grew heated, threats of contract termination and deportation filling the small apartment. When Zara returned, her face was pale despite her purple complexion. "They know," she said simply, sinking onto the bed. "Someone saw us in the gardens, reported it to the agency. I have 24 hours to end all personal contact with you or they terminate my contract." "We'll fight this," Marcus said immediately. "There must be legal recourse, worker protections." "I'm not a citizen, Marcus. I have no rights here beyond what my contract provides." Zara's voice cracked. "And even if I did, fighting them means legal fees I can't afford and time I don't have. My family depends on the money I send home." Marcus dressed quickly, his mind racing. "I'll buy out your contract," he said. "I have savings, investments from Elena's life insurance I never touched. Let me do this." "No," Zara said firmly, standing to face him. "I won't be owned, Marcus. Not by the agency and not by you, even with the best intentions. Don't you see? That's just trading one form of dependence for another." "Then what do we do?" Marcus asked desperately. Before Zara could answer, his comm device buzzed. A message from his supervisor, Administrator Chen, requesting an immediate meeting. The timing couldn't be coincidence. The meeting was brief and brutal. Chen had received complaints about Marcus's relationship with a service worker, behavior deemed inappropriate for senior research staff. "You're undermining the colony's professional standards," Chen said coldly. "Terminate this relationship or I'll have no choice but to recommend your dismissal." Marcus returned to Zara's apartment to find her packing, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this to you," she said. "You've worked your whole life for this career. I won't let you throw it away for someone you've known 3 weeks. You're not someone," Marcus said fiercely, pulling her into his arms. "You're everything. And I'll be damned if I let them dictate who I can love." The word hung between them, finally spoken aloud. "Love. We can't fight them both," Zara whispered. "The agency, your employer, the system. We'll lose everything." Marcus held her tighter, his mind working through impossible calculations. "Then maybe," he said slowly, "we need to change what we're fighting for." That night, they sat together making plans that terrified them both. Plans that required sacrifice, faith, and the courage to build something new from the ashes of what they were losing. A new beginning. Marcus submitted his resignation the next morning, stunning Administrator Chen into rare silence. "You're making a terrible mistake," Chen warned, but Marcus had never been more certain of anything. He met Zara at the gardens one last time as employees of Titan 7. "I'm not buying your contract," he told her, taking her hands. "Instead, I want to invest in your future. Medical school, Zara. Let me help you finish what you started." "Marcus, that's years of tuition, living expenses," she protested. "I can't accept that." "It's not charity," he said firmly, "it's investment in the woman I love. You'll pay me back if you insist, but I believe in you. And I believe you'll make an extraordinary physician." Zara struggled with pride and practicality before finally nodding. She negotiated her contract termination, agreeing to repay a portion of her training costs in exchange for clean separation. Marcus used his savings and took a consulting contract with a private research firm based on the neutral colony of Haven Station. The transition was harder than either anticipated. Marcus's colleagues on Titan 7 treated his departure as professional suicide. Zara's family initially refused to accept money earned through what they saw as shameful means, though her mother eventually softened. The first months on Haven Station were financially tight, emotionally exhausting, and filled with doubts. But slowly, impossibly, they built something real. Zara enrolled in Haven Medical Academy, her Valtorian credentials finally recognized. She studied with fierce determination, often falling asleep over textbooks while Marcus worked on consulting projects at their small kitchen table. They learned each other's rhythms, fought over stupid things like dish placement, and made love with the desperate gratitude of people who'd almost lost everything. Marcus's consulting business grew steadily. His expertise in xenobiology attracted clients from across the sector, and working remotely gave him freedom he'd never had in corporate research. He attended Zara's anatomy practicals, celebrating her perfect scores, and she proofread his technical papers, catching errors his tired eyes missed. 6 months after leaving Titan 7, Marcus stood in the audience as Zara walked across the stage in her graduation robes, accepting her physician's license. Her purple skin seemed to glow with pride as she found him in the crowd, her smile radiant. That evening, in their modest apartment overlooking Haven Station's Central Plaza, Marcus presented her with a small box. Inside was a ring, simple platinum with a Valtorian crystal he'd commissioned from her homeworld. "I know we did everything backwards," he said, kneeling before her, "met through an arrangement, fell in love against all logic, burned our lives down to start over. But Zara, you're the best decision I've ever made. Marry me. Build this impossible future with me." Zara pulled him to his feet, tears streaming down her face as she kissed him. "Yes," she whispered against his lips, "yes to all of it." They were married quietly 2 months later, surrounded by the small community they'd built on Haven Station. Zara accepted a position at the colony's medical center, specializing in refugee health care. Marcus continued consulting while starting a scholarship fund for displaced students, naming it after Elena with Zara's blessing. On their first anniversary, lying in bed watching the stars through their bedroom window, Zara traced the scar on Marcus's shoulder from a research accident years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly, "giving up everything for someone you barely knew?" Marcus considered the question, thinking of the prestigious career he'd abandoned, the comfortable life he'd left behind. Then he looked at the woman beside him, her purple skin luminous in the starlight, her brilliant mind now saving lives daily, and the future they were building together. "Not for a single second," he said, pulling her closer, "you were worth every sacrifice. You still are." Zara smiled, that same genuine smile that had captivated him in the Nebula Lounge what felt like a lifetime ago. "Good," she said, "because I'm pregnant." Marcus's world tilted, joy flooding through him so intense it bordered on pain. As he held Zara, feeling her laughter against his chest, he marveled at the strange path that had brought them here. A paid hour in a coffee lounge, a desperate attempt to escape loneliness, had become the greatest love story of his life. Sometimes, he thought, the best things come from the most unexpected places. You just have to be brave enough to recognize them and strong enough to fight for them. And as Zara kissed him, their future stretching bright and impossible before them, Marcus knew he'd fight for this woman, this life, this love, until his very last breath. The end.